Ladies and gentlemen, and of course, distinguished guests and panelists here, I just want to start by saying that today, Gaza is not just geography, it's a question mark carved in the conscience of our time. For nearly 2 years, its skies have thundered with warplanes, its earth has shaken under bombardment, and its people, of course, nearly 2 million people, have been driven from homes that no longer exist. And this is actually crucial because even if by some miracle these people get to go home again, they won't find them. The United Nations tells us famine is not approaching anymore. It's already there, confirmed in the north, spreading southward, devouring children before our eyes. More than 360 people, including more than 130 children, have literally died of hunger, starvation. And 450,000 children in Gaza City are trapped in the impossible, expected to flee bombardment without food, without shelter, without safe passage. Hospitals, the last refuge of hope, have become targets. They've always been targets since this war started in 2023, but it has definitely gotten worse. Gaza's remaining hospitals, by the way, nearly half of them are located in the northern region, specifically in Gaza City. Half of the ICU beds as well, the very heart of this new ground offensive that has officially started yesterday, Gaza City. Yet, in the darkness, we have to admit that lifelines do exist. Turkey, for example, has sent over 100,000 tons of aid, ships, planes, ambulances, field hospitals. The Turkish Red Crescent has prepared nearly 7 million hot meals for thousands of children. Convoys do continue from Turkey, from other countries as well, even as hungry crowds tear sacks apart in desperation. This is Gaza. It's a battlefield, it's a graveyard, but also a litmus test of humanity itself. So today we ask, why is relief still blocked? What shields can protect doctors, nurses, children, patients? How do we stop the politics of war from devouring the rights of children? And crucially, what can be done in the next phase, not in theory, but in practice? To help us discuss this and answer these questions, or at least attempt to answer them, we are joined by four voices who together form a compass for truth and action. Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh, lawyer, former MP and advocate. You're the politician here today. Paul Williams, broadcaster, theologian, founder of Blogging Theology. Yusuf Ozan, Deputy Director General and Editor-in-Chief of Anadolu Agency. Paula Gellivia, President of Médecins Sans Frontières, Spain. So, welcome, all of you. Together, we will not only analyze, but demand answers to the simplest yet hardest question. Can humanity still rise to its own test? Let's begin. I would love to start with Yusuf here. Walk us through a day in the life of an aid truck, because you have extensively seen the coverage of such events. How does it break down? Permissions, last mile chaos, lack of fuel, security. How do you see this?
All right, thank you so much for giving the opportunity to join this panel with the very distinguished guests as well. As Anadolu, we have been pretty much dragged into this genocide inflicted upon civilian population, not just as journalists, but also as the victims of this genocide as well. Because Anadolu has been on the ground, not only after what had started in 2023, but Anadolu has been around like 15 years in Gaza.
Yes.
So this is just the beginning. It was just the beginning of our companionship with the people of Gaza. However, the roots of the crisis in Gaza, of course, goes back to as early as the 20th century, probably. But as Anadolu, since 2023, we've been really very struggling with what's unfolding on the ground. Before that, the media building that we were sharing together with AP and Al Jazeera was also bombed to the ground, and it also caused a very big uproar in the media ecosystem globally. But back then, what we haven't actually thought about or thought of was actually the magnitude and the level of the war inflicted upon the people of Gaza later on. Actually, whatever that had happened before 2023 paled in comparison of what had come afterwards. Ever since, we have lost two friends. Both of them have been two superstars of our reporters on the ground, and they were killed during their coverage of another Israeli strike. That means they were killed deliberately in a tap strike, double tap strike. So the double tap strikes are the most dangerous ones for the journalists because it deliberately aims at increasing the number of casualties on the ground with direct intention of manslaughtering.
Yes.
That had also happened to Al Jazeera crew like 2-3 weeks ago. And together with, of course, with Reuters and AFP, freelancers were also among the victims of that attack. I'm not even counting the civilians. In fact, our friends are also civilians outside
Yes.
of their work. So Anadolu have been really struggling, not as much as the whole population, of course, but it's a fact that many of our friends have bore the brunt of the horrors of the war, including some friends that we have been successfully evacuated because of their losses in their immediate families. One of our reporters have lost 4 of 5 children of his.
Ali.
So it's been really very difficult for all of us. But getting back to your question, of course, the
Yes.
one day of an aid campaign into Gaza is no longer existent. The number of the trucks that are being allowed under the patronage of the Israeli authorities is just photo ops. It's just photo ops. It's to tell the world or to lessen the impact or unwanted impact of the headlines in detriment of the Israeli narrative. It is trying to lessen the impact to their policies. It's just for photo ops. Because the number of trucks that are entering is no way capable of meeting the demands of that population. And that was actually the main message that we were trying to deliver with our coverages in the lead up to this position, in the lead up to this moment in time. Eventually, people would start suffering mass malnutrition, and the effect of this malnutrition would eventually end up in killing of people, and that is actually the case right now. So at the moment, we are actually witnessing the worst of worst, of course, but that is creating also something which wasn't or weren't the case before, it is creating a greater global awareness and a desire to set things in motion, at least in the best interest of the civilians living in this genocidal attacks, under these genocidal attacks.
Of course.
That's actually something that we should be hanging on.
And part of the reason is the coverage from the ground.
Exactly.
Not just the coverage of aid, because, I mean, we wish there would be more aid to cover,
Of course.
but unfortunately the coverage is mostly about children being killed.
At a time when the aggressors are actually saying they're going to be launching a land operation that we have never ever seen the likes before, this is even becoming more important. The international
Yes.
community, the civilians, individuals, our families, our brothers, our sisters, our parents need to stand up and continue repeating the every lines that we have to utter in the face of the aggressor, and then call on to the politicians, especially those influential countries must step in. That is actually a must. So aside from that, I mean, ever since what we have been witnessing in Gaza, as Anadolu, again, we just try to note down and note down in the memory of consciousness of humanity what could be counted as genocide, the evidences of genocide. And we came up this book of photos, what we call the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
In this book, our photographers, our cameramans, and our friends, not only the staffers, but those who actually are cooperating with us on the ground as freelancers. And some of them, as I just mentioned, have lost their lives in collecting these evidences together. Actually, this book tries to very briefly tell what is the articles that would blame a government as committing genocide, and what is the corresponding evidence that we collected in the streets of Gaza. So according to Rome statute, you cannot attack civilians with a white phosphorus bomb, for example. Anadolu photojournalist was on October 11th, was on the front lines of the Israeli tanks and artilleries, and they were the first ones who actually figured out that there were white phosphorus artillery rounds piled up next to these tanks, and the very next morning and in the coming week, those white phosphorus artillery rounds were heavily used upon the civilian population living in Gaza City. So like this, we have, this is the 9th edition, and this is getting updated every month. And this has already been included in the ICC's case against Israel. And we are, at least we as the journalists are, of course, covering and providing the service to our subscribers and the greater public a daily flow of information about everything from the aid campaign to the military updates and the civilian casualties. We are also trying to bring together the evidences to make these permanent, because the digital brain-rotting the scrolling issues are not actually helping us note down a permanent record of things that had happened on the ground. So as Anadolu, we will continue to do our best with our friends on the ground and with our distribution channels to collect and distribute and disseminate this information continuously on, because this is the best that we can do. Yes, thank you.
And as a follow-up comment, by the way, I specifically remember that day because I was there with some friends, journalists, including Anadolu. So yes, indeed, it was white phosphorus, and they attacked us as international journalists mainly with white phosphorus. I remember it was October 11, and it was near the Roots Hotel.
Exactly.
And Paula, I remember one time taking a medical training for journalists, and we were also taught how doctors and nurses operate, especially in a war zone. And I remember a lesson about triage. I also spent the first 5-6 months of this war in Gaza, and I couldn't help but notice that the concept itself changed because triage in Gaza means that sometimes a medic responds to a call, he goes to the scene, he finds or she finds 3-4 wounded people, and they can only help one. So they make a tough decision of who lives and who dies. Hospitals as well, inside hospitals, that decision is being made because hospitals in Gaza are without oxygen, without anesthetics. How does MSF or other medical organizations still operational in Gaza decide which lives to save first, which lives are impossible to save? How do you make that call?
Well, it's an impossible choice, no? I was in Gaza in December, just before the wrongly called ceasefire. I say that because during these weeks there were bombings every single day and killings every day. I had the chance to spend some days with my colleagues. I visited the hospitals, Hospital Nasser, Al-Mawasi Health Center, Al-Atar Health Center. I was in Derbala, in Khan Yunis, in Rafah. Even in Spanish, that is my mother tongue, I'm incapable to find the words to define what I saw. All these activities that we are running, just for the information of the public, MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, Médicos Sin Fronteras, Doctors Without Borders, is an independent organization that used to work in conflict areas and responding to emergencies, basically, in the most difficult places of the world. We have been exposed to a lot during our professional lives, and I have to admit that what I saw there, it is beyond everything that I have seen before. We are working with a lot of difficulties. We have more than 1,000 staff, most of them being colleagues from Gaza. And we are struggling because of the blockage of the supplies. We are doing magic with what we have. And I would like to give you just an example. Nasser Hospital that was recently bombed twice.
Yes.
We are working there. We work in the maternity, in the pediatrics, in the emergency room, in the neonatology that probably is the most beautiful place in Gaza today, the neonatology of Nasser Hospital, full of babies.
But not incubators, though.
Incubators, yes.
Not incubators.
We have incubators, but we have sometimes 4 kids in each
Exactly.
incubator.
Yesterday, I saw a photo that my friend, a journalist in Gaza, he posted. It's for one incubator in Nasser Hospital, and it has 5 or 6 babies in them.
Yeah.
So again, how do you cope with this? How do you deal with this?
Well, we have a staff that is very committed, and we are trying to do our best. But today, Nasser Hospital is completely overwhelmed. We have an occupancy rate, bed rate of 200%. So it's impossible to work in these conditions. And most of the patients are injured. So the normal, in brackets, patients, no, the severe ill patients, are not reaching the facilities because it's impossible to attend everybody. No? I would like to show you this picture because I don't know if you've seen it. Yes. I think that is the most powerful advocacy report that you will see ever. This is a drawing that was done by a kid in our mental health clinics in Al-Mawasi, and it showed very well what's going on today in Gaza. I would like to highlight something that is fundamental and is very important today, that is the militarization of aid. I think that it's super important that we put this on the table. I don't know if you all know the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation.
The notorious foundation, which is supposedly exists to help Palestinians, but Palestinians themselves call them death traps.
Exactly. So the distribution sites of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundations are not humanitarian at all. They have turned into militarized and extremely violent zones, causing mass civilian casualties among those seeking food. Between June and July 2025, 1,380 injured and 28 dead bodies were received in MSF facilities.
Only in MSF?
Only in MSF,
Exactly.
It's just a part. And they were coming from the GHF distribution points, including 25 children with gunshot wounds, some as young as 8 years old. These distributions are chaotic, are deadly, with estampedes, crowd crashes, with precision shooting against hungry people that have all been documented. We recently published a report that I strongly recommend you to read, that is called "This is not aid, this is an orchestrated killing." Distributions of the Global Humanitarian Foundation sites have resulted in extreme levels of violence and killings, primarily of young Palestinian men that are sent by their families to look for food, but also for women and children. In August, one day, the Israeli authorities asked the population to send only women to collect food to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation sites. And it happened exactly the same, the shooting, the killings, etc. So what we would like is to see this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation dismantled. When you are asking me about this triage in the health centers, imagine that every single day in Al-Mawasi Health Center, we are receiving injured people from these distribution sites. Every single day you have a mass casualty event, and for our Palestinian colleagues, this is something that is terrible because...
And that's when they have to make that tough decision of who gets to live and who doesn't.
Absolutely. And sometimes you don't have enough material, you don't have enough drugs, you don't have oxygen, you don't have time to transfer the patient to Nasser Hospital. It's important to remind to the audience that all the hospitals in Gaza have been or destroyed or partially destroyed. So
Yes.
the capacity to take care of those patients is impossible. There are more than 12,000 people waiting for medical evacuation with health issues or injuries that are not possible to be solved in Gaza. And I think that collectively we can do more. I would like really to thank you for inviting me, for bringing this testimony. And I would like to thank you as well, the Turkish government, for the efforts that they are doing. But I think that collectively we can do more. We can do more. I'm convinced of that.
Yes. Let's talk politics, shall we? Governments call this sometimes operational issues when it comes to humanitarian aid, when it comes to the fact that hundreds, if not thousands, are being killed on a daily basis, mostly children. And whenever a government is asked about this, they say operational issue. What legal or political levers can turn access into reality? Sanctions, embargoes, perhaps the ICC? We haven't seen any actual progress there, haven't we?
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you very much indeed for the invitation. And may I also commend the speakers who we've heard from, and also, Paula, your remarks on the Turkish government, who continue to convene panels of experts around the world to make sure that people understand what is going on.
Absolutely.
As a politician, I'm also have been a lawmaker, and I wish to speak a bit about the rule of law. We have seen the ICG state and warn against genocide at the beginning of last year.
Mm-hmm.
We have now seen the UN Commission of Inquiry yesterday confirm that a genocide is taking place in Gaza. Many of us have been able to see this for a long, long time. Citizens of the world are being asked not to believe the evidence of our own eyes, evidence which we wouldn't have but for the bravery of journalists who have given their lives to give us the truth. As far as politicians are concerned, everything is about political will. We have the ICJ, we have the International Criminal Courts, we have the United Nations, the European Union. And the point is, what are our governments doing? How can we be in a position whereby one member state of the Security Council with a veto is responsible for whether a child in Gaza, or indeed anywhere in the world, eats or starves? But that is where we are. That one vote makes a difference. And we're not talking about charity, any of the work that we've spoken of today. This is an individual's human right guaranteed under international law, the right to food, to be fed. So it's all about political choices. And of course, the United Kingdom, from where I come and where I've served as a parliamentarian, has many questions to answer in this respect. I was pleased to hear finally the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, refer to a genocide, possibly because the nod from the inquiry gave her the opportunity, or perhaps she felt safe to say that. But we've been seeing this for a very, very long time now. The report of yesterday has a line in it so poignant because it refers to civilians being shot, children with makeshift white flags of peace being shot with sniper guns. So this goes way beyond a humanitarian cause, is questioning the very soul of people who exist and have the power to do something about this. And the time has come, but so often we are seeing political will, which is necessary and can move mountains. Political will can change this all like this. President Trump is currently enjoying hospitality in the United Kingdom, rightly so. He holds a great office in the United States of America. But in that one meeting, the King, or indeed the Prime Minister at Chequers tomorrow, could say, we need you to end this now. And it is possible with the political will to do so, because international law exists for a reason. However, we are seeing its selective application. We are seeing double standards. We are seeing that some lives matter more than others. In fact, we are seeing that Muslim lives don't matter. And people are marching on the streets of countries across the world to say to their leadership, do something about it. But our leadership is governing for today and not thinking about the future. And what is the future? I say to you all today, a future of young people who are angry that we have been incapable of solving an issue that has unfolded before their very eyes. These people are going to be our future leaders. Our future leaders are going to be angry. If our future leaders are angry, where is peace and democracy? So I also wish to pay tribute to President Erdogan and this government, who I've seen in action in Gaziantep in 2015, when I saw Syrian refugees cross the border looking for safety. And if I may, just as I close my opening remarks, because I know we want to hear from other panelists, just say this. Women and young people are key to outcomes in relation to what's happening in Gaza. They need to be part of the process, because where you have women, you have longevity in peace agreements. Where you have young people, we have people looking to the future. All of these people matter. And in Gaziantep, I saw that women were given dignity by the Turkish government. Women were in charge of the camps. Women were teaching the children in these camps. And that is what matters. If international law doesn't apply to all of us, it applies to none of us. So enough of separate prices and values on people's lives across the world. The lives of the people of Gaza matter, and it is time that the governments around this world grew a spine and saw that they are overseeing the erosion of rights that will come back to bite the whole of the world, because if it's Gaza today, it can be anywhere tomorrow. The urgency is there. The will must be there to bring this to an end, and it can be done in a moment.
Thank you. Thank you for every word you just said. And yes, indeed, Israel acts with absolute impunity because, I mean, they have the US backing them. And we all know what President Erdogan said once. The world is bigger than five. But unfortunately, every time there is a resolution in favor of Palestinians or that criminalizes Israel's doing, we see the US saying the famous word, veto. And we need to find an answer to that question. What can be done in practice? How can we make sure that this stops? I also have a question for Mr. Paul here. How do we keep, I mean, given what you heard, how do we keep the moral weight alive in a world drowning in statistics? And I'm sorry to say this, but it seems numb to horror.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. One of the things that's not been mentioned so far that I'm very passionate about is the role of theology, the role of scripture, the way it's weaponized. We've seen this with the Israeli PM a year ago, referencing a particular passage in the Old Testament, referencing the Amalek, who are a group of people that were apparently targeted for complete destruction, the men, the women, the children, the babies. And this weaponization of the Bible, because it is the Bible, is a real problem. And we need, I think, to focus on education in terms of particularly confronting Christian Zionism, to get controversial. It's a very popular movement in the United States, and it's spreading throughout the Anglosphere as well. And it is classically, in terms of historical Christianity, it is a heresy. The idea that the Jewish people, regardless of faith, regardless of their covenant with God, are a special people of God, regardless of what they do. when their protection and their promotion can be used to justify crimes. So I'm very keen that we should bring in the theological dimension and we understand how that is being used and weaponized and twisted to justify genocide, to justify ethnic cleansing, the occupation of Palestinian land in the West Bank as we speak. So I think we need to also have that dimension.
But again, what can be done on the ground? I mean, yes, what you just mentioned is very important. It is one of the main causes for what we see in the world, what we see happening. I absolutely agree with you. But again, how can this problem be solved?
Well, that's above my pay grade. I don't know the answer. And the simple answer is a certain president in a certain country who has the power, the authority to make a difference. But there needs to be
raising awareness. For example.
Raising awareness. But in my own very limited kind of niche, it is confronting those forces of darkness that masquerade as faith, bringing in more public awareness of the truth about Islam, particularly. This is a absolutely central reality here, that Islam is not, Islam is a religion of peace, it's a religion of justice, social justice, economic justice, protecting the poor, the vulnerable, having a regard for the dignity of humanity. So people need to understand the truth about Islam, which is not occurring in the West, but people are losing that sense of respect for other faiths. So that's the kind of level I'm operating at the grassroots, combating distortions of religion. We're seeing a resurgence of Christian nationalism in Britain at the moment, which is explicitly anti-Muslim. We saw that in the recent march in London with Tommy Robinson. And this is causing a lot of alarm amongst Muslims and ethnic minorities. So we need to rally together, we need solidarity, we need to educate, and we need to talk about faith, the Christian faith, the truth about the Bible, the truth about Islam.
And the truth about Judaism.
Judaism, absolutely. And
Because
Judaism is complicated. It's multifaceted. It's not all one kind. You have.
For example, what is happening in Palestine should not be about religion, but it is somehow.
It's becoming more and more so. Yeah, absolutely. And I want to stress, in terms of historic Orthodox Judaism, Zionism is a heresy. And indeed, it was seen as a completely marginal outlier until probably the middle of the 20th century, when it started to gain more and more traction. But there are many Orthodox Jews still today who support Palestine, support justice, and support solidarity with Muslims. But I think the religion, to some extent, has been hijacked by extremists. It's not Islam that's been hijacked by extremists, it's Judaism, to be honest, if we can be that blunt. Not all of it, but a large section of it.
Not all of it, but a huge chunk of it.
Yes.
Enough to say that we want to take over this country and that country, and because
the great confession of faith, the Shema of this is the Hebrew word meaning hear, Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Some people have said it's now, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is Israel. Israel has taken the place of God in the worshipful allegiances and focus of many Jewish people, and that is a huge problem.
And in politics as well, Israel is acting like a god. So, Paula, medical neutrality is definitely shattered. How can you make sure that your staff on the ground is safe? How can you protect your doctors and nurses and volunteers in conflict zones, and particularly in Gaza?
We cannot.
I have seen,
by
the way, many medical places being targeted in Gaza. I know that some of, maybe not directly your staff, but doctors and nurses, they were killed. Many of them were killed in Gaza. Is there anything you can do to protect them?
So, 1,500 medical staff has been killed. And among them, 12 of our colleagues. Local staff. Of course, there are a lot of negotiations with the Israeli authorities when it goes to movements. We notify our movements, we notify our locations, but we have been forced to evacuate 14 hospitals. So we have been working in 14 hospitals, and we have been moving because it was too dangerous. The most recent case was 3 days ago in Gaza City. We are working in 3 hospitals in Gaza City, and 2 hospitals and 1 health center, and the health center of MSF Spain was evacuated because it's simply too dangerous, and because we were not having coordination meetings with Israeli authorities. It's very complex, and we are very aware that at any moment a fatal incident could occur. This is clear, and we know that since the very beginning, and we know that every time that we enter into Gaza. So we assume this risk, and what I want to highlight is that most of our staff that is from Gaza, they are subjected to constant evacuation orders. So most of them, as my colleague mentioned with journalists, they have moved 10, 12 times to save their lives. Now we see the forced displacement of Gaza city population. I don't know where they are going to live. There is no space. There is no physical space in the mid area of Gaza Strip or in the south. There is no space. They will live, I don't know where, honestly. And most of them will decide to stay in Gaza City because they don't have the means to move. They cannot move. Transport is expensive. There are not enough trucks and cars to mobilize all these people. Elderly, injured, women that are alone with a lot of kids, they cannot move. They don't have the money to pay for the transport. So we are going to confront again to a new massacre, and it won't stop there, because next will be probably Derbala and other areas that are still in Gaza that were not directly targeted. But as we have been mentioning since the beginning of this genocide, there is nowhere safe in Gaza. So I've been in the humanitarian zone in Al-Mawasi, living there, where it's supposed to be the green zone, where people will
Yeah, they call it a safe zone.
Safe zone. And every night there were bombings. Every night. So that's why we insist that it's urgent, and this genocide is going faster than ever. These last weeks, they are going faster than ever because they have tried they have tested the capacity to react of the global community, and nothing happened. So they are going faster. And we cannot forget West Bank, because in West Bank, the restrictions, the demolitions, the arbitrary detentions, this is going faster as well. So I'm very pessimistic, I have to say.
Or a realist.
Or realistic, but what I want to convey is that doctors and nurses, we cannot stop a genocide. We can just help people, we can just save lives. It's not in our hands to stop this genocide. Only the leaders, the political leaders of the world can do that. So still, I think that there is a big gap of communication. There is a lack of understanding of a huge sector of the public opinion in the world, that they don't understand what is happening, really what is happening inside. Today, humanitarians have become one of the only, I would say, international and considered neutral source of information. But this is not our role. We can save lives. We have to bear witness because this is our obligation, but we cannot stop this genocide.
And people should always keep in mind that humanitarian workers, doctors, aid workers, journalists, they're people and they have families to worry about too. So your staff, for example, the local ones, they are working in that hospital or clinic, but they're also worried about the 10 relatives they have, the 10 family members who are still under bombardment and they couldn't get a chance to evacuate them, for example. Yesterday, I was talking to my friends in Gaza, some of them journalists, of course, mainly. And a friend had to leave, finally. She had to leave Gaza City and head to Deir al-Balah after 7 days of waiting. She was willing to pay the money. She managed to somehow pay the money for the truck, but she had to wait 7 days because there are no enough trucks in Gaza. And she's still in the street. There are no places to. It's not just about money, by the way, because we have to keep in mind that Gazans, Palestinians in Gaza, they don't have money. But even if they do, it's not possible. And she's a correspondent, a journalist. So, and she has to worry about her kids as well. She has little kids who are moving with her wherever she goes. Yusuf, I'm sure you're always in contact with journalists on the ground in Gaza, including, of course, your own staff. How does this work for their families? How can they do this? How can they continue working, continue the coverage, while they have families to worry about?
Of course, it has always been difficult for our friends on the ground to continue covering stories, including deaths, mass casualties, that happens every day, every week, and every month. This is a very difficult task for our friends as well, including, of course, they immediately turned out to be the relative of some of their losses as well. So you have to wear caps that you change very quickly. Once you become a journalist, and the other moment you become
a father, for example,
father of a person that is killed by the Israeli bombings. So it's of course difficult. Many of our friends are suffering from psychological impact of this, of course. I mean, I don't know if something like PTSD is enough to explain the level of mental destruction or the impact of anyone can endure, but that's what it is. But of course, I mean, we have also seen many friends who are actually very shy about expressing their losses as well, because they have seen many people who have lost even more than them. That is also creating some sort of a different way of coping with trauma as well.
Yes.
They are simply very shy of expressing their losses because they know someone lost everything. Someone else lost everything. So that's a big grief and pain for our friends as well. However, I also saw our friends, the bravery while they are covering these stories, because they know, and we know, that the Israeli army and the snipers are coming after them personally, just like the Al Jazeera colleague that were just recently killed. Israeli commanders were actually filming tapes challenging them to stop covering stories, otherwise they're going to be targeted, and hence did they. And they lost their lives. And journalists are being called names by the Israeli authorities to stop working on the ground and tell the stories of the people, of the Gaza people, to the global community. So our friends are also, we saw in these videos, being targeted by the snipers with selected intention. The bullet just passes right above his head while he was trying to document the death threats, just as you have mentioned. You, I think, said
The GHF.
1,300 or 1,400 people have been so far killed while trying to reach the aid that are being distributed in these death traps. So our friends are being deliberately targeted while trying to document this. So it's very difficult, of course, but in the meantime, we also see that they do not do their job. They are not any longer doing their job as a job. It's like being like a messenger, because especially in the last wave of starvation in the streets of Gaza, the photographs that were taken by our friends made the headlines on the whole international news outlets, showing the proofs of the effects of the starvation and the blockage of the aid and all these policies of the Israeli government. And it changed dramatically the way how people see the acts of the Israeli government in the countries that were historically not so much supportive of the Gazan people. So they know the impact of the photographs and the stories and journalism. So they're no longer working just only as a journalist, but they know how impactful these images are, and they no longer actually, of course, lives are, I mean, we as human beings are instinctively seeking safety and refuge under protective roofs, but our friends are no longer actually being very considerate of their surroundings, because there's nowhere safe. There is nowhere safe where you can sleep. There is nowhere safe because the tents are being targeted. There is nowhere safe to eat, because many times have you seen people have been killed en masse while they were actually holding a festive in Gaza during like a religious Eid or something. But just as I mentioned, our friends are well aware of the role that they are playing as journalists, and they are doing it to the fullest that they can. And we sometimes are also calling out and telling them to stay low, because we know that they are being individually and personally looked after by the Israeli army, and that is not, of course, something special to us. That is true for all international journalists operating in Gaza, because no one is being allowed to enter. Yes. No one is being allowed to exit. There is a handful of brave people on the ground doing whatever they can with whatever they are left with. Many of their equipment have already been gone. Some of them are working with their mobile phones for more than a year, but that's not something that prevents them from speaking truth to power. That's not preventing them to distribute the pictures that they take on the ground. And just as I mentioned, it's very difficult, but they're really very shy from actually expressing how sad they are, because they know there is thousands of people out there who have lost more than they do. So that's the story of coverage on the ground.
Many of Palestinian journalists in Gaza have developed several complexes. Sometimes it's the Messiah complex, sometimes it's the Rubik's complex, sometimes it's something else. Sometimes you're in so much pain that it makes you numb. I know that from experience.
Interesting.
So, mentioning the UN, Tasmina,
Yep.
and the inquiry they did, calling it a genocide or incitement to genocide. If the law cannot be enforced, what should we expect will happen?
Well, first of all, we're not going to accept that the law cannot be enforced. We cannot allow that to happen, or for even the world to think that it's possible to ignore the law, because that exists as our only protection. Israel is committing genocide. Israel should have sanctions imposed upon it, as has happened in other countries. You see, what we have here is a selective implementation of international law. You either agree and follow world order, or you don't agree with it at all. What you cannot do is selectively pick and choose what suits you. So yes, sanctions on Russia are correct in its illegal invasion in Ukraine, just as housing refugees from that war is important and must happen. But who's spoken of housing the refugees of what's happened in Gaza? In Scotland, we received yesterday 2 children who, through a programme through the UK, who have agreed to take between 30 and 50 children who are medically in terrible medical condition as a result of the war. We've taken 2 in Scotland, and the rest of the UK will take between 30 and 50. But if we had stood stronger and taller and grew a spine years ago, we wouldn't be dealing with the problem, the aftermath of the problem, well, ongoing problem, as we see it just now. So lack of action has consequences. So let's take action. Israel has committed the gravest crime it is possible to commit in international law, and that is genocide, and it's happening before our very eyes. Children are starving before our very eyes. There is an international arrest warrant for Netanyahu that requires to be exercised. I can tell you from my political party's perspective, if Netanyahu sets foot in Scotland, he will be arrested. And every country that believes in international law and the power of the international court should do the same thing. You can't say, oh yes, there's a warrant, but we're not going to exercise that. Why not? Where does it end? When we get to pick and choose the laws we implement, the world comes to an end and world order comes to an end, and you have anarchy. And we are teetering on the edges of that. Because the people of the world who are believing the evidence of our eyes presented by the brave people on this panel today in their daily work are saying, actually, we're not going to have any more of this. So we are going to have lawlessness. And I say, on the streets of the UK, it's been alluded to early on in the panel, Muslims are scared because people are classing us all as the same, as extremists. There are people marching against our rights, people marching against refugees, people saying refugees who are the result of wars that the West has created shouldn't then be housed in the United Kingdom and beyond. So we're going to have to stand taller and firmer. And all I can say to the people of the world is this: if you are electing politicians who cannot do the job at your next available opportunity, get rid of them. Because we need politicians who stand up for the rule of law and who will end this genocide, who will end this selective implementation of international law. And war criminals must face the consequences of their crime. Otherwise, war criminals of the future will not be deterred from doing the same thing again. We promised our children that genocide wouldn't happen again, only for them to question us. Mum, what's happening in the world and what are you doing about it? Well, it's time for us to do something about it. It's time for our leaders to be stronger, and they must be called out on their inaction. And if you can see it in no other prism, see it through this. International law exists for a reason. It must be implemented. It must
must be
apply
protected.
across the world. And people like Netanyahu cannot and must not act with impunity. He should be arrested and face the full force of international law, as should those involved in committing crimes against humanity and the people of Gaza and Palestine.
What about the UN?
And the UN itself. Your President Erdogan, has said the world is bigger than 5. And yes, it is, and it has to be. Because the Security Council is hamstrung in different conflicts by the vote of one member. How can we have progress if one member, because of their own personal interest, political interest, can stop?
Tasmina, that is precisely my question. What can we do about this?
We have to reform it. There has to be reform of the United Nations. United Nations General Assembly must insist on reform. Who can be the big voices in the reform group? Well, obviously, Turkey is one.
Yes.
I think the rest of the Muslim countries should join in that call, as should the Global South, because the tectonic plates are shifting in world politics.
If it's about fairness, well, this isn't fair. You know, I'll give you an actual number. It's not a figure of speech, people. There are more than 1,000 resolutions at the UN and the UN General Assembly in favor of Palestinians. More than 1,000. That is a real number. How many of them was actually implemented? Zero. صفر يعني. Why?
Well, because the UNG
Because
is
of the
empowered.
US.
But may I make just one point on this, which I think is very important? We must not, because of that, and because of the frame within which they are working, say that the United Nations General Assembly doesn't matter or any other institutions don't matter, because that speaks to the unilateralists of this world who think everything is about a deal. The world can only continue and justice can only be delivered if we're working together in the common pursuit of justice.
So that regime needs to be reformed.
Yes.
That system of the UN GA should be fixed.
It cannot be about self-interest. It has to be about the interest of every citizen of this planet.
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Paul, if law fails, I mean, we will try to remain hopeful, but if law continues to fail, because it is failing right now, do faith networks step in? What role can they play in pressure, funding, housing, evacuees?
Yeah, all of that. I think we have to realize the terrible reality is that the law has failed, but the West is now perceived to be completely morally bankrupt, to have lost its soul, to have no credibility. It cannot lecture the world on human rights and liberal values and democracy and freedom and so on, when it is actively supporting, giving diplomatic cover, economic, military aid and so on, to a regime that is killing innocent people systematically in genocide. So I think, I mean, I'm embarrassed to say in Britain, the established church, the Church of England, seems to be doing nothing. It just seems to be talking about other things. It's not focused on this issue. It's not politicized. It's not really getting it. And I think there's a kind of an apathy in the churches in general. At least that's what I sense. And more alarmingly, as I've already mentioned, there is a rise in Christian nationalism, not just in Britain, it's there in Australia and other countries, which are actively siding with Zionists and also being very anti-Islamic. So there is a new reality emerging in the West. It's getting uglier by the day. The situation is changing, and we need to be very aware of that. And we need to push back against it. We need to find allies in wherever allies can be found, in charities, pressure groups, MPs, whoever, other religions. And we need to be much more active on social media, posting about these things, doing on TikTok, on Instagram. We just need to be very active. And a lot of our young people are very active, particularly Western non-Muslims are seeing what's happening in Gaza and are asking, why are Gazans so, where are they getting the strength from to persevere? And that's because they're Muslims. They have a faith, an indomitable faith. And a number of people in the West, young people particularly, are taking Islam seriously. They're reading the Quran. They're getting inspired. See, what we were told about Islam is all lies. If you read the Quran, in a good translation, like the Clear Quran or Abdul Halim's Quran, is an extraordinary book. And it's a book of hope, a book of justice, a book about God, a book about the afterlife. So it gives context, it gives hope. It's not just the dunya centered, it's a truly theological understanding of everything that's going on and the unseen forces that are at work, the demonic, the shaitans that are just behind the scenes that are egging on the evil that's being done. So everything seems to be shifting and changing at the moment. We need, if we have faith, if we're Muslims, Christians and others, people of goodwill need to come together and form alliances, educate and look beyond the lies that we're being told about the old order, which is the Western order, which I think has just lost any credibility at all. So these are interesting times we're living in.
Yes. And how well is it really working so far? How well is it?
How well is what?
The idea that people are stepping in regardless of religions, that they should support Palestinians, for example, for the sake
Absolutely.
of humanity, and it's not about religion.
The statistics are clear. Young people in the United States, for example, are overwhelmingly pro-Palestinian now. These are Americans who are pro-Palestinians, almost unheard of. The much older generations are not. They're still kind of wrestling with the lies they're told by Fox News and so on. But young people, they get it. They see the reality on TikTok, on Instagram.
So they've been educated.
They've been educated. Well, they have seen the realities. They haven't read textbooks. They've seen the film, the footage. So they know. This is the young generation who will grow up to be the next leaders. And I'm hopeful that I'm very optimistic that the new world will come out of this. But the old order has to pass. We need a new reality, which just failed us. It failed humanity, in my view.
Technology also plays a role. Yusuf, how do you deal with the fact that there is a lack of equipment in Gaza? I know this, again, from experience. I spent the first nearly 6 months of this genocide in Gaza, and I remember a phrase that we often used. If that thing breaks, it's not going to be fixed. So protect your camera, protect the mic, don't mess with the cables because, well, we cannot fix anything, right? How do you deal with this?
Just like gas, electricity, and all those valuable resources that scarce supply, there is a very, very, very limited supply for media equipment as well. However, there's a limit to accessibility as well. Mm-hmm. The main goal is to get the texts, visuals across the digital boundaries as fast, as clean, as quick as possible. So there is no, it becomes a very trivial detail what kind of equipment you use or what kind of equipment you can accommodate while reporting on an event on the ground. So as long as you have internet connection and a mobile phone, you can actually deal with the rest of the story, no matter how challenging it could be. But of course, as an international news agency, we use a very complicated set of equipment for everyday uses that is compromised to a great extent right now. And there is no way of actually reinforcing these equipment anymore. Just like how a medical equipment is very, very difficult in nature to be transferred across the border right now. And at times, media equipment is even harder because it's being seen as a gateway for the truth to spill over the borders by the authorities who are actually having exercise authority on the borders as well. So that is actually making it even more difficult. But just as I said, there is a very limited access, which is becoming also very thin these couple of months to those equipment as well. But that is not a must. That is not a minimum for us to be able to distribute the stories to the world. A mobile phone is more than enough in most of the cases. But internet is the lifeline of everything. And as we have seen from the way how the genocide is being unfolded before the very eyes in Gaza by the Israeli government and the military, the ultimate goal becomes even more clearer now to render the whole geography inhospitable, contaminating water, cutting down electricity, bombing the roads, and terrifying people with blunt massacres. These are all serving to the purpose of destroying hope, any hope which is left after all this time, and make the souls break the souls to the extent that there will never be any hope any longer to live in the grounds of Gaza. So internet could be also under a very serious risk. I don't know what we as agency journalists or other media outlets could do in the absence of at least a more than enough quality of internet access. That could be, that is now the, I'm even very shy to express that, but even if that goes, then I don't know what we could do for the future, because just as you said, more than 1,000 resolutions have been passed so far, and these resolutions are no joke. It is the ultimate pinnacle of the modern world representation. The governments are coming together at a place where they share the sovereignty rights and interact with each other. This is the ultimate place that the humanity could have ever built till now, and now it is being rendered useless just for the sake of a country to butcher and slaughter people just as they wish and please. And it's being, the United Nations and all these resolutions are senseless in this point of view. So that is really very sad, of course. But there is hope, of course. Hopefully, inshallah. We are very close to the bottom, if not hit yet. But once the humanity reverses from here, I hope the children of Gaza and the children of Palestine will dream of a future not depicted like in this picture, but a very bright one. And at least we are doing our best to make that possible.
Yeah. Again, Turkey has sent more than 100,000 tons of aid. To be accurate, 16 ships, 14 aircrafts, and of course, I'm not even mentioning the Red Crescent, the Turkish Red Crescent. That alone has provided, I believe, more than 6.8 million meals. Did you see this on the ground? Did your staff see this on the ground? And what do they believe will happen next? Will other countries join Turkey in these efforts? Will they be able to coordinate with neighboring countries, for example, to make sure that this aid gets in?
Yes, exactly. I've got some of the exact figures that we have just recently translated into infographics for our subscribers and for the general audience. More than 8 field hospitals have been actually transferred through different means. But the most effective and the most loadful of transportation is by ships, of course. And Anadolu teams have joined that ships several times. Thousands and thousands of tons of aid of all sorts, medical, food, drinking water.
And medicine, of course.
And medicine, hygiene kits, of course, it's
Yes.
also very important.
In displacement camps, of
Starvation,
course.
famine, and any contagious medical condition is also of utmost danger for people living in Gaza under such conditions. Is something that the international community has to be also taken care of. So more than 100,000 tons of aid have been transported forth, and these are the best of the people of Turkey have done so far. But of course, from all over the world, these aids are flooding to the gates of Gaza. And even more could actually even arrive.
Yes.
Because 100,000 tons is, compared to, for example, Turkey's last decades international aid efforts, is nothing. 100,000 is nothing.
Yeah, Turkey was sending much more.
In terms of its capacity.
Yes.
The problem is with the authorities which are blocking the entrance of
Restrictions.
these aid. It's not about the capacity to send these aids there. Turkey has directly and indirectly participated in many aid campaigns around the world, and it has it is now the second country compared to GDP in terms of international aid.
Exactly.
And the Turkish people are, I mean, not only AFAD, Turkey's FEMA, is involved in these aid organizations, but the civilian NGOs are also heavily
I was just
involved.
about to say this because I've seen, I've done my research and I've talked to people in Gaza and I saw footage. Apparently, Turkey is not just officially helping. There are many non-profit
Exactly.
organizations that are also coordinating with the Turkish government, the government of Turkey, to help. But the problem remains with the restrictions.
Exactly. That is the main problem, actually, because, you know, in order to render Gaza inhospitable, you cannot let aid flood in. That is Israeli's policy. That is also why it's a genocide. It's called a genocide by all means, by all definitions.
They're making sure that people will die anyway, if not by bombardment.
Must die.
Then yes, then by starvation,
acknowledge-
by lack of medicine, by
Exactly. That is the reason why it's becoming impossible for Israel to escape from the fate of being a country that committed a genocide before the very eyes of the international community in such a connected world.
And let me just mention one more thing in this regard. I remember there was a hospital called the Turkish Palestinian Friendship Hospital.
Exactly. It was bombed.
It was stormed before it was bombed,
And
by
it
the
was
way.
the only hospital, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the only
for the
oncology,
cancer
the only oncology hospital
exactly.
in the Gaza Strip, even before this war started.
It is, yes.
And it's quite clear that this was intentional because
Exactly.
it was located in the southern western part of
Yeah.
Gaza City, an area I know very well. And in late November 2023, just 1 month into the war,
Exactly.
the Israeli troops, after they started the ground invasion, they stormed that hospital and ruined it.
Yes.
And later on, they bombed it, all of it entirely.
Yes.
And since then, that hospital alone, by the way, was treating at least 14,000 cases,
Exactly.
cancer cases. Those people, those patients, are not receiving any treatment now. They haven't received any treatment since that date.
Yes.
My question for Paula, how does MSF, Doctors Without Borders, coordinate with Turkey, for example, or other countries to make sure that they get safe passage, for example, that they get some equipment into Gaza?
Well, first of all, you know that MSF is an independent organization, so we don't receive funds from any government. We are ourselves suffering of these restrictions. I would like to give you just an example because it has not been mentioned, is the access to clean water, which is a massive problem in Gaza. Only last month, our teams treated 4,000 cases of diarrhea, and Israel authorities has blocked 1 in 10 requests to bring in desalination equipment into Gaza. So we can do more. We collectively, we could do more if we could ensure these supplies entering Gaza, and we cannot, because every single paracetamol that enters in Gaza requires the authorization of the Israeli authorities.
And you're not getting that.
We are not getting that. I've seen with my eyes in Kerem Shalom tons and tons and tons of humanitarian aid there under the sun, including our medical supplies.
And they were ruined, I think.
They were there.
No, I think they were ruined. Some of the medicine there,
Yeah,
it became corrupt.
Absolutely.
Not usable anymore.
Not usable anymore. I would strongly recommend you to go through the report Choking Gaza, which is a report based on the difficulties of supply that we have been confronted. And it's just, it's very difficult to describe what's going on. But there, in this report, you will see all the different blockages or the different difficulties that we face to enter into Gaza, materials. This has terrible consequences for the population. For instance, we have been incapable in certain moments to bring in nutritional products in a moment that we had 25% of pregnant and breastfeeding women and kids in our clinics malnourished.
Yes.
So we had to suspend certain activities because we didn't have therapeutic food. We have to perform medical acts sometimes without even anesthesia,
Yes.
without painkillers. So it's difficult for everybody. It's difficult for the Turkish government, it's difficult for MSF, it's difficult for everyone. It's difficult for everyone.
Mentioning the women, by the way, between 50 and 60,000 pregnant women in Gaza. That's an actual number. And I've done a report myself on this recently. And you might be surprised, but more than a quarter of that number are experiencing miscarriages because of what you just mentioned. Lack of access to clean water, they're malnourished, they don't have medicine, they don't have food, they have absolutely nothing. One pregnant woman told us that she could only find lentil soup. She could only have lentil soup for 2-3 weeks. That was the only thing she was eating, and even the amount was not enough. So we cannot be shocked when we hear about these staggering numbers.
Absolutely, and if you allow me, I want to complement what you say by saying that we see more and more premature births, babies born with low birth weight.
Or with deformities.
And it's worth remembering that preventing childhood and childbirth is one of the important indicators when it comes to legally determining whether a genocide is happening or not.
Great. Don't you agree, Tasmina?
Yes, I do. And the assault on the most vulnerable in society is nothing short of sickening. Women, pregnant women, and children. And, I was trying to think, I'm sure you're going towards the end of the panel, is where is the goodness in the world? Are there any countries out there standing up for what's happening? I mean, we have to commend South Africa for their efforts at the very beginning in relation to the international arrest warrant.
Of course.
President Higgins from Ireland, who spoke very early on about what was happening, and indeed we're joined today by Her Excellency the Ambassador for Spain, in terms of speaking out. So there is some hope there, and I have met people over the past number of weeks and months who are from Israel, Jews who do not agree with what Netanyahu and their government are doing and are trying to find a way out of this madness. But reporting of this is very important, and I've seen much of the Western media sometimes talk about people dying in Gaza, but the word is being killed. And what we've seen when you're removing the opportunity for people to eat, taking away their ability to take drugs by not providing with the necessities, you're killing people. And all of these mass murders are on the hands of Israel under the governance of Netanyahu. But we have to keep going. You see, what the dark forces that exist, try and do in most conflicts is wear people out, send people into the shadows, thinking there is no hope. But there is hope, and it's all we can hang on to is that hope. But use it to ensure we use every sinew and ounce of our being to highlight through the auspices of people you have on this panel what is happening, what is still happening, what is happening even though it is against international law, and say we have to find a solution to the issue.
To stopping the genocide.
We have to stop the genocide, we have to allow the aid in, we have to stop people being killed.
I do have a question here about this point in particular. How can Turkey, along with allies, of course, use their leverage to open corridors, for example, and make sure that aid does get in? Because Turkey has been pushing for this. President Erdogan, the foreign minister of Turkey, Mr. Hakan Fidan, they've been talking about this to everyone, everywhere. They're doing their best, of course. But maybe, is there a plan, for example, for other countries to join efforts with Turkey to make sure that these corridors do open?
Well, there must be, because there has to be. And, your Director of Communications mentioned earlier in remarks about ongoing diplomacy. Diplomacy is not one act that happens and it stops. It's by the minute, by the hour, by the day, by the week. It continues relentlessly, despite how tired you are, despite how worn out you are, because every day of diplomacy could save a life of a child in Gaza. So we keep at it, the countries keep at it. They become the larger group. They become the majority
It's
of
like
those with the most power.
becoming policy.
It has to be. But they shouldn't be protests, because all Turkey and other countries are observing the law. So what we do, we observe the law and we expose those who don't believe in law, expose them for what they are, and just keep doing what we're doing. And more countries will feel empowered. As I say, there has to be a strength and a unity amongst the Muslim countries. We must call upon them in this time to do even more than what they are doing. And of course, the Global South are becoming increasingly vocal in terms of what's happening in the world. But we have to keep going. We cannot lose the faith.
As a lawyer, final question to you. How can we turn these demonstrations into a law or into a policy, something changeable?
Well, the law is there. This is the whole point. We don't need to make a fresh law to deal with what's happening what's happening in the world. We need people to implement. We need those who we elect into government to implement the law. Otherwise, we take them out of power and we elect people who will do.
Do you see that? Do you see
what's
this
required by
happening?
law. It has to happen. I do, because people are marching and asking questions. New political parties are forming. People are angry. They're demanding answers. Again, as in just Whitehall, there was a Free Palestine protest. People are saying, "How can this happen? You told us it wouldn't happen." So we just keep protesting and protesting until those who are the right people, the people who are into politics for the right reasons, who have a moral compass and a responsibility to adhere to international law, are the ones who can exert the power to deliver upon it, because the people deserve and require that from them.
Yes.
Thank you. There is a danger for many of us who have comfortable lives, is that we become numb to this, because we see it constantly on our screens. And there's some, I find, very reassuring words from the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, who once said, "Whoever among you sees evil, let him change it with his hand. If he cannot do so, then with his tongue. If he cannot do so, then with his heart," which is the weakest level of faith. That's from Sahih Muslim. So at the very least, we must not allow our hearts to become numb, or because that way that injustice becomes normalized, unfortunately. And there's another amazing ayat of the Quran, which we often don't dwell on. Amazing words. Allah says, "Never think of those martyred in the cause of Allah as dead. In fact, they are alive with their Lord, well provided for, rejoicing in Allah's bounties, and being delighted for those yet to join them. There will be no fear for them, nor will they grieve." That's Quran chapter 3, verse 169. Again, these spiritual truths help to contextualize the awfulness of what we're going through, so we do not forget that there is an afterlife, that those who are martyred, in fact, are not dead. They are alive with their Lord. That includes the children, the babies, all of these people who have been needlessly slaughtered. They live on, and we will meet them again, inshallah.
Okay. In Western media, fatigue is real. Turkey's narrative is sustaining attention. Final question. How can we make sure that this stays the case? If the world fails Gaza's test, what do we lose? Not only here or there, but in ourselves. I need a final word. Yusuf.
Just as the name of this panel suggests, it's a litmus test. If you fail in this mission, then there will be any other measure that prevents humanity from falling into the abyss of a wild world in which no laws and no boundaries are present. So this is something why the international governments have been struggling so far, which is also changing dramatically, quickly, especially in the last couple of months. This is a good thing, but that's thanks to the people of the north, south, west, and east. But that's not enough yet, because things are not getting better, it's getting worse. So, as just you mentioned, President Erdogan, since the very beginning of not only this crisis, but of the injustices that were taking place in Palestine, be it in Gaza and be it in West Bank, because the policy of uprooting people from their land and houses is a direct attack against the very right of existence. So this is what's happening in this specific part of the world. So speaking up against the injustices in this world with laws, with your powerful family, with your powerful country, with your powerful alliances would actually only prove that you are there for upholding the rule of law which applies equally and justly to the people of the world. So this is, if this fails, if humanity fails in this, if the politicians or if governments fail in this, this is what actually the President Erdogan is actually using all the platforms at his use to repeat this very same line. Actually, if you fail in this, then there would be nothing left of whatever you claim as the pinnacle of the humanity. No, that's not the pinnacle. That's blatant, barbaric manslaughter. Nothing else. You cannot have any value to preach to the world except for injustices, bloodshed, and all sort of barbaric acts. But I hope, losing Hope is the ultimate goal of the aggressor. They're trying to make you lose your hope permanently. No, I mean, humanity has been at test, litmus tests, all throughout its own history, and we know many instances where actually people overcome the threats against their coexistence. So I believe Palestine will prevail, and the Gazans will prevail, and peace will come to this region, but this is going to be not a random thing. It's something that is being fought over. It's something that is being shared by all the peoples of North, East, West, and South of the world. That's probably what I can tell as my last words. Thanks.
Well, Turkey was right. President Erdogan was right and is right, because he's still saying this. He still repeats it. This isn't just about Palestine, because it won't stop there. The criminal acts need to be stopped. It's not going to stop at Gaza. And we've seen evidence of that. We've seen evidence. It's happening in the West Bank, approving the E1 plan recently, for example, the attacks on Syria, the attacks on Lebanon, talking about Iraq and Egypt. They're talking about many other places as well. So it's about peace. It's about humanity. And I think what is happening in Gaza is still keeping us all at night.
So the President Erdogan have also been a very vocal critic of what's happening in Syria throughout all the civil war.
Exactly.
At times when even risking losing the elections, even at the very last minutes of the political campaign, he, at the risk of losing votes, reiterated his very line that Turkey is going to be supporting the people of Syrians no matter what. And
Yes.
it paid off politically and, more importantly, as a human being. It paid off. So a similar thing is now happening in Gaza. And during his trip back to Turkey from Qatar this weekend, this Monday, President Erdogan reiterated the fact that Hitler was just like how Netanyahu was behaving during the first stage of the Second World War. He was winning over. He was ploughing through the steps of European
But that
countries.
never lost. That
And it ended up very badly for him.
Yes.
He was not. He did not only lost the war, but he was also. His legacy has been sentenced to eternal shame and eternal loss. So same thing is going to be happening to Netanyahu because of his policies. He's the key decision maker. There are lots of thousands of Israeli citizens who are also against this barbaric act
Yes,
as well.
exactly.
But the government is the sole, and the military is the sole responsible parties, which is deliberately and openly inviting their country to commit the last genocide of our century. Thanks.
10 seconds?
Switched on. Yeah.
Okay.
There is a danger in a distant future date. I remember 6 months ago I commented on a newspaper article, the London Times, which was going on about the rise of anti-Semitism in the UK. And I put a comment in and I said the biggest cause of anti-Semitism in the world today is Israel. This comment was deleted by the moderators as unacceptable. It violated some kind of thing. But the danger is in future that there will be, and God forbid, that there will be terrible vengeance against the Jews because of what they've done. I'm not saying this will happen, but it's a risk. I mean, I've got 10 seconds, but I wanted to highlight that we must not fall into the trap. Someone mentioned Hitler of, we mustn't do that again in revengeance in the future.
Agreed. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, our dear esteemed guests and panelists, Mr. Paul, Jasmina, Paula, and Yusuf. And I'm afraid this session is finished. But not Gaza.